Hi and welcome to our first live stream of 2026. I'm 𝘀𝗲𝗶𝗴 and I'm your host for today. I am in Brisbane, so before we begin, I'd like to pay my respects to the Turrbal people, to elders past, present and emerging. On today's show, we've got a lot to get through, so we're going to be joined by Joshua Price, who is the co-CEO of Symmetra, to unpack a growing trend many leaders didn't expect. So AI-driven redundancies are partly being reversed. So with new research has shown that a whopping 50% of roles cut due to AI are on track to be rehired by 2027. So we're going to unpack that a little bit later. We're also going to get into the latest labour market stats that are out around unemployment. We're going to have a very own chair of People to People, Mark Smith, join us to unpack that. And lastly, we're going to talk about three amazing candidates we've got that are ready to start work across Australia. So let's get into it. A new report from Gartner suggests the AI-driven redundancy cycle may be coming full circle. The report predicts by 2027, half of employers that attributed customer service layoffs due to AI will be forced to rehire the staff into very similar roles. So what does that mean for employers now? To discuss this further, we're going to be joined by Joshua Price, the co-CEO of Symmetra.
Hi there, thanks for having me today.
Thanks for joining us, Joshua. So to start off, could you tell us a bit about yourself and about your organisation?
Great. So my name's Josh. As you've heard, I'm the co-CEO of Symmetra. I've spent probably the last 20 years, I think, supporting a wide range of organisations to develop leadership capability, build inclusive cultures, and ultimately drive high-performing teams. And that's what we do at Symmetra. We are a boutique global consultancy, and we really believe that inclusion and inclusive teams are a key to driving organizational purpose and performance.
And the report I just mentioned, so it's a pretty big stat, 50% of these roles that are cut due to come back. Why do you think this is happening?
Look, I think a lot of what's happening in the AI space generally is that, is a big FOMO situation where everybody is feeling under pressure to adopt, to implement, and to make significant changes with obviously untold amounts of money being invested into AI development. And probably in many cases, we're all making decisions on the potential of AI, what we believe it can do versus what it can actually do. And I think most of us have now had that experience of using AI for various different things and building new kind of automations and new applications for it. And I think anyone with decent expertise in what they do pretty quickly finds where those limits are, where AI can be very good at solving a particular task, but it has very limited ability to sometimes extrapolate that to something else and incorporate new pieces of information. For example, I think so one of the really well-publicized cases of what you were just speaking about was Klarna, the buy now, pay later provider who laid off, I think it was a few thousand people in service roles, which seems like one of those jobs that is highly automatable and AI can do very well. And they are now hiring people back. And this is one of those things where AI is probably very good at taking your data, asking follow-up questions and working through, I think, a decision tree, but it's not going to understand that you're frustrated. If it gives a solution that doesn't work, why it doesn't work, or where human error may be coming into play. And these are things that only people can do when interacting with other people. So that is kind of that limit, I think, that we're all starting to experience, where AI is good at tasks, but it's not good at roles. And that's really where the major kind of distinction is coming in now, is probably companies moving more to saying, okay, how do we assign particular tasks to AI rather than trying to replace entire roles, which it's probably not ready to do yet.
And I like your point around the FOMO aspect, that a lot of organizations say we must get AI, we must invest in it, but and I think that's a report actually came out recently that said that a whopping 70 to 80% actually failed to deliver the value that was promised. And I think what we're seeing now is the investment and then, well, show me the return. And even knowing those metrics, I think for a lot of organizations has been quite difficult. And I suspect that's what's coming out and what we're seeing. Do you think with the investments that are made, there's a particular error that's happening with the implementation of AI tools and how that's thought through and rolled out?
I think part of what we're experiencing, that the error is kind of even in the language there, is thinking of AI as a tool. In some cases it is a tool, but it's fundamentally different to any kind of other technological tool that we've ever used before. So this is not like, hey, we've got a new CRM system, and if we just give people enough training and actually make them use it and turn it into their source of truth, and suddenly we get all the value out of it. And part of the challenge with AI is these are not just adoption challenges. These are kind of deep learning journeys that teams have to go through to fundamentally rethink how they incorporate this new semi-autonomous person / agent / thing team, which plays by different rules. It's totally untransparent. We don't know how it gets to the conclusions that it gets to. It's not part of the team meetings and communication. And that is causing some real tension and issues, I think, in organizations where they've put it into team workflows. But there's not a real understanding of how teams work with this, how decisions are made, where accountability lies, and that is having damaging effects on trust. It's having effects on how the team actually collaborates, because our way of coming together as a team involving shared models of thinking and shared understanding. How do you do that with an AI? How do you understand it, and how does it understand you and what the team are generally thinking and working on? The other one, I think, which is really coming to the fore, which is really important, is having long-term thinking, right? So we're all moving fast and trying to incorporate AI, and there's also a belief that the more we use it, the better it's going to get. And so we target where's the low-hanging fruit, and that's generally in what we would call entry-level roles in organizations. Yeah. But the problem that many organizations are going to face is they are destroying their pipeline. Right. So I think, how do people learn to do the jobs? How do they learn the judgment and the knowledge that turns them to senior leaders eventually, without having gone through, I think, all of that? And there are ways to think that through from a long-term skills and workforce planning perspective. And I think that's also part of the reversal that we're seeing, is organizations saying, like, unless we find a way to have a pipeline of new workers, often young people, but not always, obviously, coming in at entry levels of the organization and developing them into future senior leaders, we're going to have a major problem in 10 years' time.
Well, I heard someone say actually yesterday they attended a panel around the legal sector, and they said, well, the outlook from one partner was that there will no longer be junior lawyers. And I just really took me and thought, well, how on earth did that make sense that we're going to get people developed? And I think that's certainly something that's going to come up more and more, that you start your role, and if that's been replaced, what does it look like? So we're seeing quite a lot of nervousness, I'd say, around people that are starting off on their careers, and how that evolves, I think, is going to be a challenge. Do you think on the positive, with the use of AI, it can actually improve the performance of teams?
I mean, it definitely can. I think some people are adopting it better than others. I use AI in my role. There's certain areas and things where I find it extremely helpful, even in just clarifying my own thinking and decision making. And so there's definitely ways that we can use it effectively. I mean, going back to the example you said, of course, if there's no junior lawyers, then after a while there's no senior lawyers either, right? So I think we have to think about what the role of people looks like short term and long term, and assuming that AI is going to replace certain tasks permanently, what do we then do to develop people's judgment, communication skills, decision making, and so forth? So I think there are definitely, you mentioned that study where a lot of AI is not delivering returns. We are still probably in the early days, realistically, of AI. I think that there are definitely cases where it is delivering value for organizations and delivering value for people in their roles. But I also believe, I think when I've looked at the research, it's happening more at senior levels as well. So there's kind of middle and senior managers being more as orchestrators of human AI teams. I think the real challenge is for organizations to think about, how does AI add value and is useful at more junior levels of the organization, rather than just like wiping that level of the organization out. I don't think, again, that's a good long-term bet.
And how do you think organizations are going about getting the right balance, of course? So using AI, but the human capability of their teams, it's going to be an evolving thing, I'm sure. But have you got any advice for organizations that are looking to try and get that balance?
Well, look, one of the things that we do with a lot of our clients, and that's, I think, where Symmetra's core capability is unlocking sort of the human dynamics that enable this to be successful. So organizations have to start to think about this as not just a technological tool rollout, but how do we build leaders who are going to work with their teams in a way that builds trust, that builds safety, that makes people feel that they have a future, that gives them a sense of inclusion, a sense of voice. And that's not straightforward. That's something that is going to be a dynamic learning loop that happens in teams, where people have to really be able to question the AI tools, challenge some of the outcomes, understand really clearly how decisions are made and where they're accountable, where the AI is accountable, and what it means for AI to be accountable for making mistakes. These are fundamentally human coordination and collaboration problems, because it's going to be a long, long, long time before teams are taken completely out of the loop. And if we don't figure out how to have human AI teams working effectively together, then you're just going to start hitting like really just classical organizational coordination problems that are not unique, I think, to AI. I think we see it in fully human teams as well. And so there's a big leadership capability part that happens here. So we've got clients who have invested a lot in building AI tools, and they've invested a lot in sending their leaders on programs that teach them to understand large language models and AI experimentation and getting a real technical understanding of the potential of this. But the gap that they're experiencing is, okay, what happens when we actually put this into the workplace and try and implement a strategy? And those are just kind of fundamentally, as I mentioned, things where it's about teamwork more than anything else.
Yeah, it comes back to people working together. But I like what you're saying around them not just looking at it as a tool. So I really appreciate the insights. I'm sure everyone else listening will as well. If anyone did want to talk about this topic further, of course, or go to have a chat to you about it a bit more in depth, we've got your contact details that we will share. And I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. So moving on, the Australian Bureau of Statistics have just released the latest unemployment figures for the end of 2025. We're joined by the chair of People to People, Mark Smith. Welcome, Mark.
G'day, Ben. It's great to be back on live on. You've taken over. I think that's what's happened. You've taken over, but we've got some interesting stats to talk about today for sure.
We do indeed. So I'm keen to get your insights, of course. So when we're looking at the latest unemployment result, what stands out the most to you?
So what really stood out to me was that the unemployment, and sounds a bit weird what I'm about to say, unemployment actually went down. Okay, it's not a statistical fluke. It was a solid result underneath. So unemployment fell, but at the same time, employment went up, which sounds like weird that I'd be saying that. That seems logical. But in many times when these stats come through, the participation rate actually changes. So we had the participation rate this time actually going up. So you had more people looking for work who actually found work. The other thing that really struck me was that the hours worked hit a record as well. So that's quite a signal that businesses are genuinely busy. And underemployment came down, particularly for younger workers as well. So out there for job seekers, I'd say that there are real opportunities out there, but the number of people actually who are responding to job ads have gone up as well. So you're up against a little bit of competition. And for hiring managers, I'd say that your competitors are still hiring and keeping people busy. So the market hasn't paused in any particular way. There's no delays in decision making. So it's an interesting and a good result, I think.
Well, it certainly sounds like it's genuinely a positive sign for the labour market. So prediction, I know it's tricky looking into this year. We're only just starting, but what are your thoughts around 2026 and how it might play out?
Well, it's hard to say. I think that the results were good. And we've seen, therefore, this response for interest rates, etc. But in terms of the labour market, I would say that the labour market still has momentum. But I wouldn't go too far to say, or the way I would describe it, having seen these type of cycles before, is that it's normalising. So the trend data shows that the market was cooling slightly last year, but in a healthy way. But people are still working. There are more hours. There's less underemployment. But people are hiring probably, I would say, more thoughtfully. Job ads are down a little bit, which tells you that the urgency has eased a little bit and the demand hasn't disappeared, but it's like the market is catching its breath, if you know what I mean. So for job seekers, it still means, like I said before, there's a bit of competition out there. And for hiring managers, you may have a little bit more choice in terms of the number of candidates around, but they're selective. It's more of a balanced market. It's normal. That's how I would describe it.
Well, I'm going to take it as a big positive for the start of 2026. And I guess we'll keep an eye on these numbers and see what we're seeing. But certainly, just anecdotally, from what we've seen at the start of this year, people to people, it does seem to certainly started with a bit of a bang, a lot better than last year. So let's see how it plays out, and really appreciate you joining us, Mark.
No problem. See you next time.
Thank you. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are interested in looking for a new role, new opportunity, you are looking to hire staff, of course, you can get in contact with us. And thank you all for joining us. We will see you next week.